I stared in disbelief at the empty spot in my driveway where my truck should have been. Not on the street, not on the curb, my private driveway. 24 years in the military had taught me to remain calm in crisis situations, but this was testing my limits. Someone had stolen my restored 1967 Ford F-100, or so I thought until I spotted the towing notice tucked under my welcome mat. Vehicle in violation of HOA Ordinance 5.3, no vehicles with visible mechanical issues permitted on property, the notice read. At the bottom was a signature in flowing cursive. Kathleen Winters, HOA President. I had never heard of Ordinance 5.3. In fact, I wasn't even sure our little neighborhood of Oak Hollow had a functioning HOA anymore. The truck had a small rust patch I was planning to fix this weekend, but it was barely visible. This made no sense. My name is Isaac Lawson. After retiring as a Master Sergeant from the Army, I'd sunk my savings into this modest home in Oak Hollow 6 months ago. The neighborhood seemed perfect: quiet streets, reasonable prices, and most importantly, what the realtor had described as a dormant HOA that existed mainly on paper. I grabbed my phone and called the towing company listed on the notice. "Big Mike's Towing," a gruff voice answered. "Yes, this is Isaac Lawson. Your company just towed my truck from my driveway at 437 Oak Hollow Drive. There's been a mistake." The man chuckled. "No mistake, buddy. We got the call from the HOA president herself. You can pick it up for $350. Cash only. We're open till 6. I checked my watch, 4:30 p.m. This is ridiculous. The truck was on my private property. Take it up with your HOA, pal. I just do what I'm paid to do." After hanging up, I paced the floor, fuming. The HOA had never even introduced themselves to me. No welcome packet, no notification of rules, nothing. Just who was this Kathleen Winters, and what gave her the right to have my vehicle towed from my own driveway? I called my neighbor, Benjamin Wright, who had lived in Oak Hollow for over a decade. "Oh yeah, the HOA." Ben sighed when I explained the situation. "They've been practically non-existent for years until about 2 months ago, when Kathleen moved in. She found some old HOA bylaws and appointed herself president. Been terrorizing everyone since." "Is that even legal?" I asked. "Who knows? Most people just pay the fines to avoid the hassle. She's already had 3 cars towed and forced the Johnsons to repaint their house. Nobody's fought back yet." I thanked him and hung up. My blood was boiling, but I knew I needed to stay focused. First step, get my truck back. Second step, figure out who this Kathleen person was and whether she had any actual authority. I drove to Big Mike's Towing in my work car, grinding my teeth the whole way. The lot was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, making it look more like a prison than a business. Inside the small office, a heavy-set man with a name tag reading, Mike, sat behind a counter. $350, he said without looking up from his phone. "Plus tax. I want to see documentation that you were authorized to remove a vehicle from private property," I said calmly. Mike finally looked up. "Listen, buddy, I got the paperwork right here." He slapped a form on the counter. "Signed by the HOA president. That's all I need legally." I examined the form. Sure enough, it was signed by Kathleen Winters, authorizing the removal of my truck for aesthetic violations. At the top was a letterhead, Oak Hollow Homeowners Association, complete with a business license number. I reluctantly paid the fee, but I took photos of all the paperwork with my phone before leaving. Something felt off about the whole situation. When I got home with my truck safely back in the driveway, I noticed a woman standing on the sidewalk in front of my house. She was perhaps in her mid-50s, with immaculately styled blonde hair and wearing what looked like an expensive pantsuit despite the casual neighborhood setting. "Mr. Lawson," she called out as I exited my truck. "I see you've retrieved your vehicle. I do hope you'll address the rust issues promptly." "You must be Kathleen Winters," I said, maintaining my composure. "That's right. I'm the president of the Oak Hollow HOA. She extended a manicured hand, which I reluctantly shook. We haven't formally met, but I wanted to personally inform you that continued violations will result in escalating fines. Funny thing, Ms. Winters. I've never received any HOA documentation, bylaws, or even notification that an active HOA exists in this neighborhood. Her smile tightened. All homeowners are provided with the covenant documents at closing. It's not my responsibility if you failed to review them. Actually, my closing documents specifically mention the dormant HOA with no active enforcement. Well, things change, Mr. Lawson. The HOA has been revitalized for the betterment of our community. She gestured around the neighborhood. Property values must be maintained. I noticed she was carrying a tablet, probably documenting other violations around the neighborhood. I'd like to see the current bylaws and verification of the HOA's legal standing, please. Something flashed in her eyes, annoyance, perhaps, or concern, before she regained her composed expression. I'll have them sent to your email. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to. As she walked away, I couldn't help but notice she headed straight to a brand new Mercedes parked down the street. For a small neighborhood HOA president, a volunteer position, she certainly had expensive taste. That evening, I did some digging online. The Oak Hollow HOA had indeed existed years ago, but appeared to have been inactive for at least 5 years. The last filed annual report I could find was from 2018. I checked the business license number from the towing form against the Secretary of State's database. The license existed but was registered to Winters Property Management, LLC, not to the Oak Hollow HOA. The next day, I took a personal day from my job at the local hardware store. I'd been working there since retirement, enjoying the simpler pace of civilian life. But today, I needed to visit the county clerk's office. At the records department, a helpful clerk named Brittany Vincent assisted me. I'm trying to find information about our neighborhood HOA, I explained. Brittany typed rapidly on her keyboard. Oak Hollow, let me see what we have. After several minutes of searching, she frowned. That's strange. The HOA's business license expired 5 years ago and was never renewed. They haven't filed annual reports either. So they're not legally operating? Not according to our records. She looked up at me. Has this HOA been collecting fees or enforcing rules? They had my truck towed from my driveway yesterday. Brittany's eyebrows shot up. That's problematic. An expired HOA has no legal authority to enforce rules or collect money. I showed her the towing authorization form with the business license number. She ran it through the system. This license belongs to a private property management company, not to your HOA. Using it on HOA documents could constitute fraud. My suspicions were confirmed. Kathleen Winters wasn't just an overzealous neighborhood busybody, she was potentially breaking the law. But I needed more information before confronting her. Does the name Kathleen Winters appear on any of the old HOA documents? I asked. Brittany checked. No. The last listed president was a Gerald Thompson. I thanked Brittany for her help and left with copies of all the relevant documents. On my way home, I stopped by the local police station to speak with an officer about the situation. Officer Rodriguez listened carefully to my story. It sounds like you might have a case for fraud and possibly theft by deception, but we need more evidence of a pattern. What kind of evidence? Proof that she's collected money from multiple residents under false pretenses, documentation showing she knowingly misrepresented her authority, that sort of thing. I nodded. How should I proceed? Document everything. Talk to your neighbors. If multiple people have been affected, that strengthens the case. Over the next few days, I spoke with several neighbors. Many had stories similar to mine: unexpected fines, threats of property liens, even towed vehicles. The Johnsons had paid nearly $4,000 to repaint their house after Kathleen claimed their chosen color violated HOA rules. An elderly couple, the Patels, had been fined repeatedly for their grandson's basketball hoop. Most disturbing was what my neighbor Ben discovered. Kathleen Winters owned a small property management company that managed several rental properties in nearby neighborhoods. The towing company that had taken my truck, and many others, was owned by her brother-in-law. It seemed Kathleen had moved into our neighborhood, revived a dead HOA without any legal authority, and was using it to funnel money to family businesses while intimidating residents into compliance. I'd seen enough. It was time for action. I created a simple flyer explaining my findings about the HOA's expired status and invited neighbors to a meeting at my house. 23 people showed up, nearly half the neighborhood. The Oak Hollow HOA has not been legally operational for 5 years, I explained, passing out copies of the documents from the county clerk. Any fines or enforcement actions taken by Kathleen Winters have been without legal authority. The room erupted in angry conversation. People shared stories of harassment, unexpected fines, and threats. "She made me remove my satellite dish," one neighbor exclaimed. "She fined me $250 because my grass was half an inch too tall," said another. Barbara Kepler, a retired attorney who lived across the street, raised her hand. "This is clearly fraud. We need to report this to the authorities." "I've already spoken with the police," I told the group. "They need evidence of a pattern of deception. If everyone who's paid fines or been towed could provide documentation, we can build a strong case." By the end of the meeting, we had formed a committee and collected initial documentation from 15 households, totaling over $12,000 in fraudulent fines and fees. What we didn't know was that Kathleen had spotted several neighbors heading to my house and had parked down the street to watch. As people left the meeting, she approached Barbara Kepler in her driveway. I was helping Barbara carry some documents to her car when Kathleen stormed up. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded, her face flushed with anger. "Discussing neighborhood concerns," I replied calmly. "You're undermining the HOA's authority. That's a violation of Covenant Section 8.2, and I'll be issuing fines to everyone who attended this unauthorized meeting." Barbara, the retired attorney, stepped forward. "Ms. Winters, we know the HOA's business license expired 5 years ago. You have no legal authority to issue fines or enforce rules." Kathleen's expression flickered between shock and anger. "That's absurd. The HOA is fully operational." I pulled out the county documents. "Not according to official records. You've been fraudulently representing yourself as the president of a defunct organization and using your property management company's business license on HOA documents." "How dare you?" Kathleen sputtered. "I've done nothing but try to maintain standards in this declining neighborhood." "By stealing from your neighbors?" Barbara asked. "By having cars towed illegally? By forcing unnecessary expenses on people living on fixed incomes?" Kathleen's face hardened. "You'll all be hearing from my attorney." She turned and stalked back to her Mercedes. "That went well," I remarked to Barbara. She smiled grimly. "She's scared. She knows we've caught her." The next morning, I woke to find a final violation notice taped to my door. It listed 14 supposed violations of HOA rules, including unauthorized gathering, distribution of defamatory materials, and failure to maintain proper lawn hydration. The total fines came to $2,750, due within 7 days. Similar notices appeared on the doors of everyone who had attended the meeting. It was a clear act of retaliation. Instead of intimidating us, however, it gave us exactly what we needed: proof of continued fraudulent activity after she'd been informed of the HOA's invalid status. I called Officer Rodriguez and arranged to bring in our evidence. Barbara Kepler helped organize the documentation from all affected neighbors. When we arrived at the police station, Rodriguez introduced us to Detective Sarah Morgan, who specialized in fraud cases. "This is quite the operation," Detective Morgan said as she reviewed our materials. "She's collected over $30,000 from your neighborhood in just 2 months. And that's just what we've been able to document," Barbara added. Detective Morgan nodded. "This is more than enough to open a formal investigation. We'll need statements from each affected homeowner." Over the next week, neighbors filed into the police station to give statements. Meanwhile, Kathleen seemed to sense the walls closing in. She stopped issuing violation notices and was rarely seen around the neighborhood. 10 days after our meeting with Detective Morgan, I was working in my front yard when a police car pulled up in front of Kathleen's house. Detective Morgan and another officer approached her door. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw Kathleen's face go pale. After about 20 minutes, the officers escorted her to the police car. She wasn't handcuffed, but she was clearly not going willingly. As they drove past my house, Kathleen locked eyes with me from the back seat of the patrol car. The look of pure hatred sent a chill down my spine. That evening, Detective Morgan called to inform me that Kathleen had been arrested on multiple counts of fraud, theft by deception, and operating a business without proper licensing. We found evidence that she's done this in 3 other neighborhoods over the past 5 years. Morgan explained. She moves in, revives or invents an HOA, collects money for about a year, and then moves on before anyone catches on. What happens now? I asked. She's been released on bail pending trial, but we've seized her records and frozen her business accounts. The district attorney is confident about the case. The news spread quickly through Oak Hollow. Neighbors who hadn't been involved initially came forward with their own stories and evidence. The total amount Kathleen had extracted from our community exceeded $45,000. 2 days after her arrest, a moving truck appeared at Kathleen's house. She was leaving town, apparently unwilling to face her neighbors after being exposed. As the movers loaded her furniture, I noticed several neighbors gathering on the sidewalk across the street. No one said anything, they just watched silently as Kathleen directed the movers with agitated gestures. Finally, as the moving truck pulled away and Kathleen got into her Mercedes, she noticed the small crowd. For a moment, she stared at us, her expression unreadable. Then she gunned the engine and sped off without looking back. "Good riddance," muttered Mrs. Patel, the elderly woman whose grandson's basketball hoop had been repeatedly fined. "You know what this means," said Ben, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "We need a real HOA, one that actually serves the community." Several people nodded in agreement, looking at me expectantly. I raised my hands. "Oh no. I'm not interested in being HOA president." "But you're perfect for it," Barbara insisted. "You fought for everyone, did the research, brought people together. That's different from running an organization." "Just think about it," Ben said. "Meanwhile, I think this calls for a celebration. Neighborhood barbecue at my place this weekend?" Everyone agreed enthusiastically. As the impromptu gathering dispersed, I walked back to my driveway and looked at my truck, the rust patch still visible on the fender. I'd been too busy fighting Kathleen to fix it. I ran my hand over the rough spot. Maybe I'd get to it this weekend, or maybe I wouldn't. Either way, it would be my choice, not a demand from someone who had no right to make it. 6 months later, Kathleen Winters pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay restitution to all the neighborhoods she had victimized. As for Oak Hollow, we did eventually restart the HOA, properly this time, with transparent operations and democratically elected officers. Despite my protests, I was unanimously elected president, a position I accepted on the condition that our first official act would be to pass a resolution. No vehicle shall be towed from private property without the owner's consent, regardless of condition. It passed without a single objection. The day after the resolution passed, I finally fixed that rust spot on my truck. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. And that made all the difference in the world.